Welcome to the MoChill Zone. Tonight we have another great show for you. Motz and Chilly sit down with their longtime friend Alan Young and discuss his passion for journalism, how it all began for him, where he's at currently, and where is he wanting to go. And Alan, if you are listening, Cranberry Challenge accepted. Stay tuned to learn more about that. As always, if you miss any of our previous episodes, please visit us on Instagram and Facebook for the online release dates of those episodes.
Well, welcome to the MoChill Zone with your boy Motz
and Chilly.
Hey, and today we have a very special guest, and I'm gonna let Chilly
Mr. Alan Young, currently of Capital Public Radio's show Insight, filling in for Vicky, right?
Gonzalez, yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. A long time.
Yes,
friend.
man.
Hey, all
Appreciate
right.
you, brother. Thank
Absolutely.
you, man. Yeah,
Fellow
definitely,
achiever. It's good to have you on.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess Larry likes to get started off with some of the overarching questions. So I'll ask one on behalf of him this time. What made you want to do radio? What made you get into what you're doing now?
So I wanted to get into journalism. I had aspirations around journalism starting in high school. I started writing for the high school newspaper, the Gaucho Gazette, because we were the Gauchos in Petaluma.
Right
Are they still the Gauchos?
Shout out.
I don't know if that's still the mascot.
Yeah.
I think that if it still is, probably someone's coming for him.
Yeah.
But we were the Gaucho Gazette, and I remember once there was like a DUI that occurred right in front of the school, during school hours. Like they pulled someone over, and the person pulled over in the school parking lot, and all the kids were like, ah!
Yeah.
And I ran out there and I interviewed the police about what happened, and then I talked to the school administration.
Nice.
And then it was all put together, and then it came out, and the students were reading because there was like this rumor, like, dude, there was cops on campus, and like some guy was in handcuffs.
You had the prime piece of the year.
It was my first scoop.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
And so I caught the bug, and did journalism for print and digital for a dozen years, and also back in high school, I was into acting. And so in 2017, I stepped down from the Sacramento Business Journal, and I really would love to combine these two passions. Of one was performance, which I hadn't done in over a decade, with the journalism. And so I was trying to get my foot in the door at Cap Radio. They weren't taking freelancers, and so then KQED, the NPR affiliate of San Francisco, and there's always like a bunch of 20-somethings, 30-somethings trying to work for KQED. So they weren't returning my calls or emails either. And so I put together, I learned the equipment, and I put together like a 15-minute program, like I'd say podcast, but podcast actually means a serialized program. Yeah. So it was like a single produced
like a pilot
story. Yeah.
Like a 15-minute short film or something like that, sort of?
Kind of like that,
video?
Yeah. So I had done this memoir piece for Comstocks about losing my mom in this accident that I was involved in. And after I did that story, I received a text message from a lot of people. But the mayor of West Sacramento, Christopher Cabaldon, texted me after that story. And he said, I also lost my mom in an accident that I was involved in. And so I called him, this was earlier 2017. I called him for a coffee date, didn't respond to me. Finally, we see each other in the Temple Coffee downtown. And he sits down and says, I understand you've been trying to get a hold of me. And I said, yes, I'd like to write your story about losing your mom and the impact that had on you. And he thought about it really hard, tentatively agreed. And so I came over to his house, and I learned all this equipment because I wanted to get into radio, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I interviewed him, and he gave me like three or 4 hour sessions with him and told his whole story, his family story and his political story, and how the two intersected. And so I wrote this piece for him kind of in the style that I had done for myself of putting everything out there. And where that came from originally was I was interviewing business leaders, political leaders, and always like going deep with them, asking them about their parents and the early struggles they had. And I had this like big struggle that I was in. I lost my mom in this graphic accident when I was 24, and I never told my story. And so I made the pitch to him, and then he made the pitch to others of the more we share as people, the better. Like once you get to that level where you can own your story, you're going to do the world a favor by sharing it. Yeah. And so back to the radio piece, I had all this audio from him, and so I fused our stories together in that it was like the journalist that had covered the politician, and we had this adversarial relationship, and then we find out that we have this bond, this common tragedy. And so how we connected on a human level and broke through the fourth wall of our personas.
That's great.
And so I put that together, and I gave it to my friend Katie Orr, who was working at KQED, and she gave it to an editor, and they listened to it, and they called me. They're like, we're going to put this on the California Report, which goes on NPR statewide every week. Oh. And so they brought it from 15 minutes down to 7 minutes. But the cool thing is my brother-in-law had scored it with piano. Oh, nice. So when I'm like telling the story, I was like by a train with my mom while hiking in the snow. And while I was telling that story, he was like playing this low piano and then just started hitting this high note, like to encompass the pain and the terrifying nature of that. And they kept the music in it. So it was my brother-in-law had the music, so he scored it, and they put it together as this piece. And then I got my foot in the door, so I started freelancing with KQED, doing other stories for the California Report. And then that kind of died off, but when this opportunity came at Cap Radio, I'd had this history of doing some radio and a bunch of journalism in Sacramento. And so that's how I got my foot in the door there.
Nice. It's a great story. I mean, I know Larry and you can bond over young. That's got to be terrible. I know we've talked about it off the air, but if that's something y'all want to get into later, we certainly can do that.
Oh, definitely. I definitely would get into that because I definitely can understand. I lost my mom at a young age also.
You want to share what?
Well, my mom died of a hemorrhage of the brain, and see, I've never actually said this before on camera, and I'm going to say this now. Okay, my mother was young. She was only 37 years old. She died. Hemorrhage of the brain is an aneurysm, but she was young. She never had any history of that. She got hit in the head protesting against my brother's father at the time, the judge, and hadn't paid money for like years, many years. And I'm going to say his name and going to get that all involved, but he's not alive anymore. So but the thing is that from that situation, my mom had to have complications after that, and she got aneurysm. She was in Cleveland, and I was in California still going to school then. So I had to go back, and then I was 17 when I lost her. So she died. Had to take the plug, brain dead. So yeah, and so and she was an accomplished singer. She sang with lots of people, B.B. King, John Hartzman. Like if I could be a tenth of what my mom was, I'd be a superstar. Taken really early from us.
What impact did that have?
It changed everything because I had to grow up. I had my brother at the time, which we kind of are estranged right now. I hear back and forth, but I still love him. He knows that. And so, it impacted a lot. I was 17, I had to grow up, and it impacted me as far as like everything, like my life now, everything. And so, I know not losing a mom is very important. So I say with all the people out there, like if you have your mom, hold on to her, appreciate her. And I actually have a mom now, Michael's mom, so she's like a mom to me now. So that's it is like my mom. So I love her. So by the way, shout out, moms.
Yeah, shout out, mom.
We love you, by the way.
We love you, moms.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so I share your story with that. So that's a great thing you're doing, and I think it's going to help other people out there. And I'm actually going to talk about more stuff because everything with me has happened, but this story's not about me; it's about you. So I do share that. So we'll talk more about that. But yeah, I definitely want to
turn the tables on you.
Yeah, but
no, that's fine.
No, but the whole thing for you, I want to know was like you were younger, you're in radio. who influenced you when you were younger to get like that? Because obviously you had to have a bug, like somebody you were younger that you had a influence when you were younger coming up. Who influenced you to get into that type of entertainment? Because you got like your theater, you and Michael share the same kind of commonality with that. You guys probably performed together, I'm sure.
We haven't.
You haven't?
No, we've never.
No,
done
okay,
We've
wow.
never really done anything creative together. This is our first creative thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's amazing because how creative he is. And so what I want to know is like, is there anyone from your childhood or you that you saw that made you want to gravitate towards what you're doing now?
That's a great question. Thank you. So as far as live interviews, I'd say the biggest early influence was watching 60 Minutes on Sundays with my mom. My mom was a single mom. My dad was alive, and he was a great dad. He didn't live in the same town. And so on Sundays, you remember The Simpsons back in the day was on Thursdays? Mm-hmm. And then they moved it to Sundays. And so we'd always watch 60 Minutes and then flip over to The Simpsons. And that was Sunday growing up. And so I would say like Michael Wallace, Morley Safer, Ed Bradley, like those Leslie Stahl, like the whole 60 Minutes cast, watching them get the news out in this really touching way where it was an environment like this where folks are, it was not as contentious as some of the other stuff on TV. That's like Fox News and Bill O'Reilly started rising up in the late 90s. And before that, so Mike Wallace was on the show. It was either Crossfire or an early edition of Crossfire, but he was the first like tough questions on broadcast, really putting people in the hot seat.
Yeah, he was.
And then Bill O'Reilly took that to a higher level of more like high octane. It was almost like going from blues to rock, right? To hard rock, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you got this antagonistic style.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Wallace, he was antagonistic for his time, but he was really just asking tough questions. And
the Howard Cosell's came.
There's so many of them, right? And so what I strive for at Insight is to sometimes I ask tough questions if it's a politician or someone else that is in a public figure that the public wants to hold them accountable.
Yes, sir.
But I do it in a polite way. And
That's
I think that you get better answers that way.
Absolutely.
When you ask a tough question aggressively, what happens to the body? Like your cortisol levels go up.
Absolutely.
And you're defensive, and you're not going to represent yourself in the best way. Now, that can make better TV. That can make more viral moments, but you're actually not getting closer to the truth in that mental and physical state. So when you ask tough questions politely, actually can put someone at ease, and you'll get closer to how they really feel.
Right. That's beautiful, man. That's really cool. I think it takes a unique style for you to do that, though. It's like natural because not everybody has that to be able to do that kind of stuff. That's a trait that not everybody has.
Achiever, man.
Yeah, man.
Big Lebowski fan.
Oh, okay.
Huge Big Lebowski fan.
Yeah, well, see, that's why I hadn't seen you last because what you guys, most people don't know, we had a awesome Lebowski party. I want to say, right? Lebowski party.
Yeah.
I want to say
40th birthday party.
Yeah,
about a month ago.
And man, it was awesome. So I'll let him tell it. Yeah, it was awesome.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, I saw Michael's dad, as listeners may know.
Yeah.
In accordance with what I hope your listeners know.
Yeah.
Mr. Jerry Haliva.
We just aired that last week again on the radio, so hopefully.
Great. I met Michael at an event at the Crest where your dad he plays Saddam Hussein in The Big Lebowski, and he came out for a viewing of Big Lebowski at the Crest in his Saddam Hussein costume and gave a spiel about what it was like to play Saddam in the early 90s in a handful of movies. And I remember asking Michael, would he do this at my house? And Michael's like, just give him some red wine and he'll do whatever he wants. And so he did it. So your dad came out, and we did an evening with Jerry Haliva, where I interviewed Jerry about playing Saddam, and then we all watched Big Lebowski in my backyard on a projector, and it was awesome.
It was awesome. The White Russians were flowing. We had a great time. I guess I want to talk to you about your journalistic influence. I mean, I want to get at kind of our shared love for Hunter.
Right.
Do you want to talk about him at all and how?
Yeah. So I started in print before I got into radio, and it was, I actually traced it back recently. When as you get older, you sort of tell a different biography of your younger self. I once heard that in a college class of the older you get, like the story of how you talk about your early influences actually changes as you become more conscious of yourself. And so I recently traced it back. I mean, there was my mom took me to on these big trips. She took me to Kenya, Africa, when I was 10, and she took me to the Amazon in Peru 2 years later. And so she suggested I start writing a journal for these trips, and I just didn't stop journaling.
Nice.
So I'm journaling in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and then actually going back to 5th, 6th grade. What was the guy who would send you, like, you may have already won $1 million?
Publishing Clearinghouse, Ed McMahon.
Yeah, was it Ed? Is it Ed McMahon?
Ed McMahon.
Is that?
Was it actually the wrestling guy?
Well, no.
No, Ed McMahon on TV. He was on Night Show. He was on Johnny Carson's sidekick.
He's the guy that go.
Yeah. It was Ed,
Right,
Ed McMahon.
okay.
I think it was.
Right.
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Ed McMahon. I'm not mistaken. It was Ed McMahon.
So I'm in 5th grade, and I get one of these, and I'm like, oh my God, I may have already won $1 million.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sitting there. What do I got to do? And it was a foil to get you to buy magazines, right? Mm-hmm. And so I signed up for a bunch of magazines to get my $1 million.
Yeah.
And I just wrote in "bill me later" because I didn't have my mom's credit card, and I was just I'll put this in, and then so when my mom pay for it later, like somehow it'll get figured out, right? And so I started getting like Snowboarder, Game Pro, and then most importantly, Rolling Stone and Outside magazine. And I'm an only child, and so these magazines are showing up, and I start reading them. And I really loved, it was Snowboarder magazine. There's the letters to the editor, and then they write back. Well, there was this guy that would write in, and just with really odd phrasing and verse, basically. But they would keep printing him, because it was like these odd poems that were coming in. And then they would respond, because he'd have various like critiques of snowboarders. And then another person wrote in, he's like, hey, I actually know this guy. And like one time, like when we were in high school, he took 30 hits of acid and he never recovered. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I'm watching this dialogue, like the story's unfolding in the comments section of the magazine. And I was so interested in how anyone could just write in to a magazine and get a response. Like these people were not, when you're a kid, you see like snowboarding, sports, Olympics, actors, they're like gods. They're like more than people. Yeah. And it was like, oh my gosh, you could actually write in and these people will respond. Yeah. And so I became addicted to these magazines. And so when high school rolled around, I'm reading Rolling Stone and Outside like religiously, like cover to cover. And so that, I think, turned me on to Rolling Stone writers. And then in 10th grade, I think I discovered, 97 when, was it 97 or 98 when Johnny Depp did Fear and Loathing?
Oh, yeah, sure.
My mom took me out. We watched that movie together. My mom took me out to lunch afterward and told me about all the fun that she had with LSD when she was like a young hippie. Nice. She was like a Haight-Ashbury hippie. That's what you told me. And then she had the book, Fear and Loathing.
Oh, okay, nice.
And
nice.
so I started reading that as a kid, loved it, thought it was hysterical, and then found out he was a Rolling Stone writer, which made me love it more. Mm-hmm. And then just like read his collected works in high school. And then I think that my dad noticed that, I was hanging out with a rougher, my friends were always bohemian, right? So they were like guys that played music, guys that smoked pot, guys that every time the fire alarm went off at school, I knew it was one of my buddies. And my dad sort of saw this in me, and he's like, oh, there's bad boy writers. So you can hang out with the guys you want to hang out with, and you can write. And so I thought, oh, I can. It sort of makes it okay if I'm hanging out with my low life friends, as long as I'm writing about it. Because they were playing music, and I didn't have any musical talent. And so I'd sit there, and it's the teenagers or the pipes going around, and I would just sit there quietly as they made music, and I was like, oh, what am I really adding to this?
Right.
And then when I started writing for the high school newspaper, I was like, you know what? These guys are so talented, but no one knows about it outside of our crew.
Right.
And so I started doing profiles on my buddies who were in bands.
That's what's up, man. That's cool.
Yeah. And I kept that going into college. And so by the time I got to college, I was Hunter Thompson got me into political writing, and I was like, oh yeah, because anyone can engage in this. Just like my earliest times of seeing that you can engage with a magazine that can be two-way. I was like, oh, politics can be that too. Mm-hmm. So right after college, I got an internship in political journalism. Got me out to Sacramento.
Nice. I want to talk to you a little about what we were talking beforehand. Radio. How does one go about selecting a radio? Because there's I guess, two schools.
Yeah, and before that, what's up? You just want to mention something from Paul? Mention something to him?
About Paul? Oh.
No, Paul said mention something about cranberries?
Oh, yeah. What's better, cranberry sauce or cranberry?
I just had to make sure I forget that.
Paul and I proposed having a debate on the air about cranberry sauce. Nice. And where this came from was they put on the Slack, do you have any family recipes for Thanksgiving that you want to share on air as part of a Thanksgiving programming? Got it. And I don't have any family recipes, but I raised my hand at the lunch, and I was like, I will debate anybody over the best cranberry sauce, and I will take the jellied, what I call dog food style cranberry sauce.
Over anybody's
the gelatinous one.
Well, the one really thick, right?
When you pour it out, it goes.
With the grooves.
It's a statue of the jar that it came in. Yeah. And so that's an open challenge to Paul or anyone else. I'll come back on MoChill if you want to do that. And I will throw down for jelly cranberry sauce.
Okay.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to have the best cranberry. We're going to throw that out. That's what we're going to do. We're going to have a contest. We're going to see how the best. We're going to do something
one last year.
We're going to do a contest. We're going to do it up.
Well, I'd also say that's a working man's cranberry sauce.
It is.
That's we gave a shout out to moms. That's a working single mom Thanksgiving cranberry sauce. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that I'll get people on my side by saying
that. I think you will too. So, shout out.
And there's something. It's like craft cheese, right? There's something comforting to it. Even in its awfulness, then it's so awful that it's good.
Right. Well, also if you grew up with it, you get
exactly. You love it. Exactly. It has a special place in your heart. Exactly. Yeah.
I gotta say, I love real cranberry sauce, but I have an appreciation. I can go either way.
You love it all. Yeah. You're an equal opportunity. Yep. Cranberry consumer. Connoisseur.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So go with your question, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I had to get that out.
I want to talk about that too, but since we were just on the hippie stuff, I want to talk about wavy gravy.
We can talk about wavy gravy.
Nice.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe for the listeners. Yeah, for the listeners and for Larry, those aren't as tuned into the hippie scene. We are.
Yeah. That's I think where we bonded earlier. So who's Wavy Gravy?
Yeah.
Wavy Gravy was the MC of Woodstock, 68, 69, thank you.
All right.
Yeah. And he was part of this crew called the Merry Pranksters.
All right.
And they drove around the country handing out LSD to people to raise awareness about the acid test. They called it the acid test. And it started with
Kool-Aid.
These... it started with these...
Ken Kesey.
Ken Kesey's, they would hold events at is it Graham Bell Theater in San Francisco?
Yeah, with the Warlocks.
Right, with the Warlocks, the original Grateful
Dead. Is that by the Palladium? Is that close to the Palladium? In San Francisco?
Or Graham Bell Center, I don't
know exactly where.
I don't know where. Okay. Yeah, but it was Ken Kesey was this writer, and he had
flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Right, come to come
Whoa.
to fame with that
I
one.
love that movie.
And it was because he volunteered to do these tests where they would
At Stanford, right?
at Stanford, where he was a student, where they were giving the students LSD to like test the effects.
Wow.
And so that's what was actually the original inspiration for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so he becomes famous with that one, gets really interested in LSD, starts doing these LSD events. You mentioned in San Francisco, this is like late 60s.
Okay.
No, it's like 65, right? 64,
like early, early on.
It's Woodstock.
64,
65.
Before
the
Woodstock,
hippies.
right? Yeah.
So this is like Beatles were like mop tops,
Right.
ties. Like this is before they got hip. Like this is like.
You want to argue this is what turned them into hippies.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
This is actually
This
what
is ground
started
zero.
that movement.
This is patient zero.
Patient zero,
yeah,
for sure. And so they go on this road trip, and talk about crossing generations with Neil Cassidy, the star of On the Road, Jack Kerouac,
for sure.
was their bus driver, and I guess he was like methed out all the time.
Yeah, always on like, tweaking.
Right. But it was all these kids that were just like, they were the first like naked acid-free hippies, and they were turning the rest of the country on. And so Wavy Gravy was part of that crew. And in his later life, like after that scene died down, he bought property in Laytonville, far northern California, near the coast.
Okay.
Like in the general region, that Tri-County area, the Emerald County area, and started a kids camp. He started a performing arts camp for kids.
That's real good.
And I got to go as a 9, 10, and 11-year-old. And it was you learn circus tricks like juggling, diagonal sticks.
I'll show you a picture of this guy.
Unicycles, right?
Yeah.
And then it was also performing arts camp, so getting back into the performance aspect.
Okay.
And
which one did you do?
Well, if you did performance, Wavy Gravy was the coach.
Oh,
and so he was
right?
so he was this actor, and he actually coached Harrison Ford back in the day, and a number of other well-known actors. And you got to be coached by the Wavy Gravy, doing improv. So his thing was ad-libbing, improv. And so I took Wavy Gravy's improv class as a 9, 10, 11-year-old. Yeah.
That's real cool.
I had to bring that up.
Absolutely.
I'm a fellow nerd.
Yeah, and see, what I would ask, like, that's probably one of the coolest people you ever met. I was like, in your travels, which one of the people that you actually
It was an
that stands
adventure
out?
for sure. Yeah.
So
Stay tuned for more with Alan Young after this.